When I tell you this is one of the most outrageous HOA revenge stories you'll ever hear, I'm not exaggerating. It started with a single piece of paper taped to my front door, just 30 days after we moved into what I thought would be our forever home. I'm a father first and always. My boy, Daniel, is 16, wheelchair-bound after a spinal condition that hit him young. My wife and I chose this gated community because of the so-called peaceful suburban lifestyle it promised. Wide sidewalks, quiet cul-de-sacs, and what the HOA proudly called family-friendly amenities. But the very thing we installed for Daniel's independence, the wheelchair ramp leading from our porch, was the spark that lit the fire. The issue. Letter read, "Ramp violates HOA aesthetic guidelines. Remove immediately or face daily fines." I stood on the porch reading it aloud, my hands shaking. Aesthetic guidelines? Are they serious? My wife came up behind me. "They can't. Make us take it down. Daniel needs it." I wanted to believe she was right, but I'd already heard HOA horror stories before, and something about the tone of that notice felt like the opening shot in a war we hadn't signed up for. The next day, I was out front adjusting the ramp when a woman in her mid-50s strutted up in yoga pants, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. "You must be the new family," she said, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Carol, vice president of the HOA." I wiped the sweat off my brow. "Nice to meet you, Carol. I assume this notice came from you?" Her lips tightened. "Yes, the ramp violates community standards. It lowers property values." "Property values?" I repeated, my voice rising. "My son's in a wheelchair. He needs this to get in and out of his home." Carol tilted her head like I was being unreasonable. "We have rules for a reason. You'll need to submit a special request form, and even then, I can't promise the board will approve it. We can't just let everyone build whatever they want." That was the first moment I realized this wasn't about property values. It was about control. A week later, another notice came, this time about our medical transport van. "Commercial vehicles prohibited overnight. Remove immediately." I read it aloud in disbelief. "It's not commercial, it's ADA compliant. It's the only way Daniel gets to school and doctor appointments." Carol once again showed up to explain. "Rules are rules," she chirped. "The van is too large. Neighbors have complained." "Neighbors?" I asked, scanning the quiet street. "Or just you?" That's when she gave me that look. The smug, self-satisfied grin of someone who thought she had all the power, and to be honest, for a while she did. Pause here. If you're already angry, comment HOA Karen below. Because trust me, Carol earned that name and more. Every homeowner watching this knows the feeling. You move in, you pay your dues, you follow the rules, and then the HOA finds some absurd reason to come after you. It's the universal suburban headache. But for us, it wasn't about paint colors or mailbox heights. This was about my son's freedom. I tried being reasonable. I wrote a detailed letter citing ADA requirements and medical necessity. I even offered to paint the ramp to match the house trim, to keep things aesthetic. Their response? Another. "Fine. This time, $100 a day." My wife sat at the kitchen table, her eyes red. "We can't afford this." I clenched my jaw. They want us to choose between Daniel's independence and their stupid rules. That's not happening. The HOA board called a meeting. I showed up with Daniel beside me, his wheelchair squeaking. Slightly as we rolled into the clubhouse, the room fell silent. You'd think bringing my son would soften their hearts. Instead, Carol leaned forward into her mic and said, "This is not about your child. This is about uniformity." That was the moment I snapped. "You're harassing my disabled son," I said, my voice echoing across the room. "And if you think I'm going to roll over, you don't know me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably. One man muttered, "They've gone too far." That's when I realized something important. Not everyone supported the board. Some were just too afraid to speak. And here's where I'll ask you, What would you have done in my shoes? Tried to compromise or fought back from day one? Drop your prediction below, because what happened next shocked even me. The fines piled up, the board threatened liens. Carol even hinted at foreclosure. My boy asked me one night, "Dad, are we going to lose our house because of me?" That question broke me, but it also lit a fire. Because in that moment I remembered something. I wasn't just a father, I was a veteran. I'd fought for freedoms bigger than this, and I'd be damned if I let a smug HOA Karen strip my son of his dignity. That was the night I started digging through bylaws, state statutes, and federal protections, and buried in those pages was the weapon that would bring the entire HOA to its knees. I sat at the kitchen table that night, papers spread everywhere, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My wife had gone to bed exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. Every notice, every fine, every smug smile from Carol replayed in my head. I typed one phrase into the search bar: how to fight HOA discrimination. That's when I stumbled onto something that made my pulse race. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA compliance. Buried in the statutes was clear language. Any community or association that interferes with accessibility for disabled residents was in violation of federal law. Not a guideline, not a suggestion. Federal law, I whispered to myself. They're not just wrong, they're breaking the law. The next morning, I called a disability rights attorney. His name was Mark, and within 5 minutes of explaining our situation, he interrupted me. "They sent you a notice about removing a wheelchair ramp?" "Yes," I said. He let out a sharp laugh. "That's not just wrong, it's textbook ADA discrimination. Document everything, every notice, every fine, every conversation. You've got a case, and it's strong." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. I started keeping a binder. Every notice went into a plastic sleeve. Every email from Carol, every voicemail, every board meeting minute I could get my hands on, it all went into the binder. I wasn't just a dad anymore. I was building a case. And here's the part Carol didn't see coming. The neighbors had been watching. At first it was whispers over fences. A woman down the street stopped me while I was walking Daniel's service dog. "I don't agree with what they're doing," she said quietly. "My brother's in a chair too. It's cruel." Then came the first letter slipped into our mailbox. No return address, just a handwritten note. "We support you. Let us know if you need witnesses." Carol thought she had the whole neighborhood cowed into silence, but every petty notice she sent me was creating cracks in her own wall of power. The board escalated. They tried to ban Daniel's van from the driveway again. They even left a notice saying it would be towed at owner's expense. I marched into the next board meeting with Daniel at my side. My voice shook, but not from fear this time, from fury. "If that van disappears from my driveway," I told them, "you won't just be facing a fine, you'll be facing a federal judge." Carol smirked. "Empty threats don't scare us." But the room behind her wasn't as confident. I caught the nervous glance of the HOA president, a man named Greg, who shuffled his papers and avoided my eyes. I walked out of that meeting, Daniel's wheelchair humming beside me, and thought, they don't know yet, but their days are numbered. Here's where I'll pause and talk to you directly. Imagine you're in my shoes, binder full of evidence, attorney on speed dial. Would you take the nuclear option? Or would you try to negotiate one last time? Comment below. I want to know how you'd handle it. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Mark, my attorney, called me. "They've made it easy for us," he said. The fines, the threats, the meeting minutes where Carol openly said this wasn't about your child. It's all damning. We're filing under ADA discrimination and asking the court to consider dissolving the HOA entirely. Dissolve the HOA? I repeated, stunned. It's rare, Mark admitted, but when an association crosses the line this blatantly, judges can strip them of their charter. It's the ultimate punishment. For the first time, I saw the finish line. Then came the twist none of us expected. Carol, drunk on power, pushed harder. She sent a final certified letter threatening foreclosure if the fines weren't paid in full. Thousands of dollars for a ramp and a van. My wife read the letter at the table and started crying. Daniel sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad, don't give up, not for me." And that was it. My resolve hardened like steel. We filed the lawsuit the next day. The summons went straight to Carol and the board. When Carol got served on her front porch, she made a scene loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "They can't do this. We're the HOA. We make the rules." But the truth was finally settling in. The HOA wasn't above the law, and the law was about to come crashing down on them. By the time the first hearing rolled around, something incredible had happened. Neighbors who once stayed silent began showing up at our door. People who had been fined for silly violations, flower beds, flagpoles, Christmas lights, offered to testify. The HOA thought they had power, but what they really had was a long list of enemies who were finally ready to speak. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom. The judge looked over his glasses, asked us to state our case, and within minutes, it was clear we had the upper hand. The ADA wasn't vague, it was crystal clear. Mark leaned over and whispered, "We've got them, just wait." And as Carol fidgeted at the defendant's table, her smirk gone for the first time, I thought, this is only the beginning. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the shuffling of papers and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Carol sat stiffly at the defense table, her face flushed a deep red. The rest of the board looked equally uneasy, as if they were finally realizing their little kingdom was crumbling beneath them. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This court has reviewed the filings in Johnson versus Green Oaks Homeowners Association. The plaintiff alleges discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The defendants argue that their enforcement of aesthetic standards falls within their authority as outlined in community bylaws." He paused, fixing Carol with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. "But there's a line between maintaining uniformity and violating federal law." My attorney, Mark, rose and walked the judge through our binder. Each notice, each fine, even meeting minutes where Carol had said, in her own words, "This is not about your child, this is about uniformity." That phrase hit the courtroom like a hammer. I saw a couple of jurors exchange looks of disbelief. "Your Honor," Mark said, his voice steady, "this is not just petty harassment. This is targeted discrimination against a minor with disabilities. The HOA not only failed to accommodate, they punished the very modifications required by federal law." Carol shot up from her seat, unable to hold her tongue. "That's taken out of context. We were protecting property values." The judge's gavel slammed. "Sit down, ma'am. You will wait your turn." For the first time since moving into that neighborhood, I felt the balance of power shift. When it was my turn, I stood and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. His wheelchair squeaked softly as I spoke. "My son just wants to live like any other teenager, to roll down the ramp into the sunshine, to ride in his van to school without fear it'll be towed away. We're not asking for luxury, we're asking for dignity." The courtroom went silent. Even Greg, the HOA president, lowered his eyes. Then came the bombshell. Mark submitted our financial records showing the thousands of dollars in fines the HOA had tried to collect. "Your Honor, this was an attempt to coerce this family into removing ADA accommodations. It's not only illegal, it's immoral. We ask not only for damages, but for the dissolution of this HOA's authority. You could have heard a pin drop. Dissolving an HOA is the nuclear option, but Mark wasn't bluffing, and the judge knew it. The verdict came quicker than I expected. Judge Harris leaned forward, his voice steady. This court finds that Green Oaks HOA willfully violated the Americans with Disabilities Act by discriminating against the Johnson family. All fines levied are null and void. Furthermore, due to repeated, deliberate misconduct, the court hereby dissolves the Green Oaks Homeowners Association, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Carol's mouth dropped open. She looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Daniel squeezed my hand, his voice soft but full of relief. "Dad, we won?" I smiled down at him. "Yeah, buddy, we won." But the victory didn't end there. The ruling became public record, and within days the story spread through local news. Headlines read, "HOA dissolved after discriminating against disabled teen." Reporters called. Neighbors cheered. People from other neighborhoods emailed to say thank you, because our fight had given them courage. And Carol, well, let's just say her days of smug clipboards and power trips ended in public humiliation. At the next community gathering, now just a casual neighborhood barbecue without an HOA, she tried to speak, only to be met with glares and silence. Someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's the woman who tried to take a ramp from a kid." She left in tears. This is where I'll talk to you, the viewers, directly. Has an HOA ever pushed you too far? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever wondered how to fight HOA harassment, remember this. Know your rights, document everything, and never let bullies hide behind bylaws. Because here's the lesson. Authority doesn't make someone right. Sometimes the most ordinary families can bring down the most powerful boards. Looking back, I see more than revenge. I see justice. I see a community freed from fear. I see my son rolling down that ramp head high, knowing his father fought for him and won. So to every HOA out there that thinks they're above the law, let this be your warning. You mess with the wrong family, and you might not just lose a lawsuit, you might lose your entire association. And to every homeowner watching, take this line with you. You don't have to be afraid of the HOA. Sometimes the underdog wins. What about you? Do you think the judge was right to dissolve the HOA completely, or should he have just fined them? Drop your opinion below. I can't wait to see where the discussion goes. And if this story fired you up, share it with someone who's ever dealt with an HOA bully, because trust me, this could happen to anyone.